Hello, everyone. Welcome to United Synagogue Lunch and Learn. My name is Rabbi Rafi Goodwin from Chigwell and Hainault Synagogue. As you can see, we are in the synagogue today as we all slowly get back to normal. Please God, when we get to the summer, we will have made it. Please God. So today we're going to discuss some of the ideas behind the Sfira. As we know, tonight is Lag BaOmer, the Yortzeit, the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, a great spiritual man. And because of that, the mourning restrictions are suspended over Lag BaOmer. People can get married, you can get a haircut. I desperately need one. I missed the last opportunity a few weeks ago. I couldn't quite make it. So if you need a haircut, now is the time. The United Synagogue custom is the month of Iyar. We observe the mourning restrictions. So Lag BaOmer, however, is a welcome break in the middle. Listen to some music, have a few hot dogs, whatever it is. Have a barbecue, as the custom is. So we're going to look today at the reason why we observe mourning restrictions in the first place during the Sfira period, or in the month of Iyar at least. So we're going to open up the source sheets. So we can see over here, it says a Gemara in Yevamos. So Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students. So that's 24,000 in total, in an area of land that stretched from Givat to Antipatris in Judea, and they all died in one period of time because they did not treat each other with respect. They didn't show kavod to each other. The source continues. And the world was desolate of the Torah, and Rashi mentions the Torah there was a severe problem. There was a risk that the Torah could be completely forgotten at that time. Rabbi Akiva came to our rabbis in the south and taught them his Torah, and you see there he got a group of second disciples together: Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, and they upheld the Torah at that time. So we'll stop screen sharing for now. The question is, how is it that Rabbi Akiva, who is famous for saying, loving your fellow, this is the main principle in the Torah, or one of the most important things in the Torah. How could it be his own students didn't show respect to each other, and because of that they all died? Such a terrible indictment on their teacher and Rabbi Akiva. What's going on? So again, let's look over at the source sheets. We're going to try and look at Rabbi Akiva's opinions in different places of the Talmud and try and understand what his worldview was and what he tried to get over to his students, but perhaps they missed, or perhaps Rabbi Akiva didn't stress enough that it could be that they didn't show respect for each other. So let's look at this source. It doesn't seem at all related. As you know, the laws of a zimun, when three people eat together, they must make a zimun after eating. And we're familiar with how it's laid out in the benches. I have here a bench and sing. And it has the zimun, Rabbi Sai, Nevarech, and everyone responds, Yehi Shem Hashem Mavarach Miatal Zolam. Barashos, the person leading then says, Barashos, etc. Nevarech, Sha'achan Meshalot. So if you have three people, that's the zimun we make. Over here, the Gemara discusses the formula how they used to do it. So it says, Kate Mazamnin, how did one recite the zimun? In a group of three people, the person leading would say, let us bless, which is what we say. Nevarech. But if there was more than three, if there was three including him, so there were four, he would say Baruch Hu. He would tell them, so to speak, you bless, because now there's four. Without getting too worried about the Nevarech or Baruch Hu, we see there's an interesting idea over here that Rabbi Yossi Aglili mentions that depending on how many people you have, the zimun changes. If you have a minyan, we say Elokeinu, very much like it says here in the Mishnah. But once you got to 100, or 1,000, or 10,000 people at a meal. You imagine having a meal with 10,000 Jewish people. The complaints about the soup not being warm, or figuring out the bill at the end. All these things would be a nightmare. But nevertheless, Rabbi Yossi Glili says that it makes a difference how many there are. For example, he says if there were 10,000 Jewish people eating a meal together, the person leading the benching would say, here it is, Riboy Omen Evorech, Lashem Elokeinu, Elokei Yisrael, Elokei Atzvakos, Yeshiv Akruvim, Alamazon Shachanu, a whole long introduction to the benching. Whereas we stick to the ideas. Once you hit a minion, once you have 10, you say Elokeinu, and that's it. We don't change it if you've got 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. We don't change the formula. So what's the debate over here? It seems like, we'll stop sharing the screen for a second. It seems like Rabbi Akiva is saying, once you hit a minion, once you have 10, there is a qualitative change in the gathering. You now have a minion. God's presence is on that klal, on that community, on the tzibur. But Rabbi Yosef Lili, who's arguing, he says, no, you have a minion, very good. But if you keep adding individuals, each individual counts. And then when you get to the next milestone, 100, the formula of the Zimun changes. Or 1,000 or 10,000, it keeps changing. So we already get this idea that Rabbi Akiva is very much into, you add another person to a minion, they become absorbed into the minion. Even if you add 10,000 people, once you have a minion, they all become joined into that cloud, to that one unit. Rabbi Yosef says, no, each individual can affect a change, and depending how many you have, the Zimun changes. Okay, so already we see this, that Rabbi Akiva is very much into the cloud, the community, the tzibur, and adding anyone to that, they become absorbed within it. Okay, let's again look at the source sheets. Next source down. This would be unfortunate if this would take place, but nevertheless, Gemara in Bava Basra is taught in a Parasha. One who is prohibited by a vow from deriving benefit from the people of a particular city is prohibited from deriving benefit from anyone who has stayed there for 12 months. Let's say someone has a broigus with a city that he lived in, whatever it was. There's a certain fight went out over there, was going on. He said, right, that's it. I'm so furious with those people in that city. I'm going to make a vow. I'm not going to benefit from any of them at all. So what does that mean? So the Gemara says here, if he says from the citizens of that city, the Hebrew is better, Anshe Ha'ir, the men of that city, I'm not going to benefit from. So who qualifies as a man or people of the city, citizens? So it says anyone that's been living there for 12 months. So anyone that's been living in that city for 12 months, this person cannot benefit from, he's made a vow not to benefit from them. What if they've been only living there for 11 months and however many days, but not 12 months? Then he can. Okay? And the second part of the Mishnah goes on to say, if someone says they're not going to benefit from Yoshvei Ha'ir, the residents of the city, that's not as strong as a citizen. Citizen is the idea of 12 months. A resident is only 30 days. But nevertheless, let's just focus on the first case. The question is asked, what if someone moves into that city the day after this angry man has made this vow that he won't benefit from anyone from that city? So we would see, well, he's moved in after the vow. He's not lived there for 12 months. Yes, he's going to live there permanently. So he is going to stay there now, from now on. A little bit like when someone makes Aliyah and they decide they're living in Israel. So they're from England or Chutz La'aretz, where they always kept 2 days Yom Tov. Once they make Aliyah, then they're going to keep 1 day. That is their new status. Straight away, as soon as they land in Israel, they made Aliyah, 1 day Yom Tov. Amazing. And if they come back to Chutz La'aretz, they go back home for holiday, whatever it is, they'd still keep 1 day because their main residence now is in the land of Israel. So the question a little bit like here, the person moves into that city, they're going to stay there permanently, but they haven't been there 12 months, they've just arrived. Do we say, well, the person made the vow today, and that person moved in the following day, so he should be able to benefit from the newcomer to the city. He's not included in the person's original vow. Another opinion says, no, he has now become part of that city, very much like someone making Aliyah. He is now, that is his new status. And therefore he becomes part of the Anshe Ha'ir. He becomes one of the citizens. He doesn't stay as an individual anymore. He becomes part of the tzibur, the community, the klal. So Rabbi Akiva, based on the Mishnah that we just learned about how you make a zimun, he says, no, once you have a minyan, that's it. Everyone becomes absorbed into the minyan, however many you have after that, and the zimun formula stays the same. And over here it says the same. Someone that moves into that city, even though it was after that person, the angry man, made that vow, he becomes part of the city. He becomes enveloped. He becomes part of it. He no longer is an individual that moved in after the vow. He becomes part of the community. Okay, so Rabbi Akiva very Very clearly, he's very much into this idea of community, that the individual becomes part of the community and almost sort of loses his status. Not loses status, but he loses the idea of being an individual by himself, becomes part of the klal, the larger group. Okay, let's look at the next source. Okay, this is very interesting. So there's a Gemara in Sota. The whole discussion is a little bit unpleasant, but more or less, we'll try and summarize it. This Gemara that I'm sharing, often people say under the chuppah. You know, rabbis officiating at weddings will say, you have a man and a woman. I actually drew this out earlier. You have, we'll just stop sharing for a sec so I can show you this clearly. You have a man and a woman. You have ish and isha. So you can see they're spelt very similar. Man is with aleph yud shin. Ish. The woman, isha. She has a hey instead of the yud. The man has a yud instead of the hey. But if you take those letters that are different, the yud and the hey, the yud that the ish has and the hey that the woman has, and you combine them, I didn't write it out, because that is actually God's name. Yud and hey, ka, is one of God's names. So the idea is, in a marriage, you have God's name. You have the man and the woman, and with God in the marriage, there will be shalom bayis, everything will work out well, the egos won't get in the way. But as soon as you take out the yud and the hey, take out those letters, what are you left with? Take the hey off here, you'll be left with just aish. Take the yud out here, you'll be left with just aish. Fire and fire. This is why they don't say this bit under the chuppah. You'll have lots of fights, people, raging arguments, throwing plates around, all sorts, people storming out. That's what we don't want. So we see that within a married couple, a marriage, there is this idea of God's name, which is indivisible. Now I look back at the source sheets. Why am I teaching you this? As follows. It's a bit of a long way round. But if we had a case of a soita, which is sort of the opposite of shalom bayis, the husband is very concerned that his wife is being unfaithful, and he warns her in front of two witnesses, please don't seclude yourself with a certain man. And she did, and there were witnesses. Then she would have to go up to the temple and drink something known as the mei soita, the water of the sota, which would test her to see if she had been unfaithful or not. And if she had been, it would actually kill her. And it would also affect the man that she'd been having that illicit relationship with. Part of this process, however, the woman also had to bring up a barley meal offering, a mincha. And how any mincha used to work was the Kohen who was working in the temple, he would take a handful of it, and actually we'll stop the sharing the screen for now. He would take a handful of the mincha offering. There was a certain way he would scoop it up. He would put it on the mizbeach, on the altar, and it would be burnt. And the rest of the mincha offering, there was a lot more than just a handful, that would be eaten by the priests. One of their gifts they used to get. Okay, very good. That's how a mincha worked. Now, the problem is, if the wife over here, her husband, let's say her husband is also a Kohen, makes it complicated. Let's see if we can figure this out. I know it's lunchtime. So the Kohen has a special rule when he offers a mincha. When a meal offering is brought by a Kohen, yes, they take the handful, they put that on the altar, that's burnt up, but the rest is also burnt up. No one eats the remains of a mincha of a Kohen. Special rule by a Kohen, as they have many special rules, as we know. So the question is now, the woman is bringing the mincha with her husband, because everything the woman knows, the husband has a part in it too. So now we're stuck. After they've offered the original handful of this mincha, this meal offering, what do we do with the rest? Do the other Kohanim eat it, which is the case normally by a normal person? By the wife, she's just a regular Yisraelite, regular Jewish person. Or we've got a problem because the husband's a Kohen, and because if he brings a mincha by himself, after the original handful is offered up, the rest is also burnt. So what do we do? So the Gemara comes out with a solution. So what we do is they offer the original handful, and the rest, we can't burn it all because of the wife, because really, because of her, the rest should be eaten by other priests. And we can't let other priests eat it but we can't burn it all either. So what do? We end up burning it elsewhere. Okay, it's a little bit complicated, but the point is, they both have a part in this mincha. We're concerned about the woman and the husband, and because he's a Kohen, we can't burn it in the normal way, but it can't be eaten either because of him, but we can't burn it all because of the wife, the back and forth. The big question is, the law is a single person, only one person is allowed to bring a mincha. It has to be offered by us. It says nefesh kisakriv mincha. A soul, an individual brings a mincha. Two people, a meal offering, cannot bring a single meal offering. So how is it allowed, with this case of the sota, that the husband and the wife bring it together, and because it's they both have a part in it, we don't know really what to do with it. We end up burning it somewhere else, so it doesn't get eaten, and it's a whole complicated thing that we just spent 3 minutes trying to explain. So now going back to this picture that we had earlier, Ish and Isha, that it has God's name in a marriage, the Yud and the Hey. That sort of hints already to the idea that God's name is one unit. Well, how do we know this? Because it says by Shabbat that we know one of the 39 malachot, 39 forbidden things that we can't do on Shabbat, is writing, kotev. We don't write on Shabbat. We don't even touch pens, the muksa, etc. Now, normally, if you write 1 or 2 letters, depends what you do. 1 letter, you shouldn't write. It's forbidden. But there's no punishment until you write 2. Once you've written 2 letters, already that's considered writing in Jewish law, and you would be liable for breaking Shabbat. The examples are given. If you wrote, for example, you wanted to write the name Shmuel, and you wrote Shim Mem, first 2 letters, but you didn't write the whole name, you just wrote the first 2. That's already 2 letters, you're liable for breaking Shabbat. You could say, well, I didn't write what I wanted to write, doesn't matter, 2 letters, or the same with Shimon, Shim, Mem, or Shimon. You didn't write the whole name, but nevertheless, it's considered writing, and you're liable for breaking Shabbat. Interesting Gemara in Yerushalmi says, but when it comes to God's name, writing God's name, you're not liable until you write the whole name. So this won't help for some of God's names that are anyway 2 letters, like the Yud and the Hey that we just spoke about, Ka, or Aleph and Lamed, Kel. But let's say Shakai, Shin, Dalad, Yud, that we have on the back of the mezuzah scroll. If someone just wrote Shin and Dalad on Shabbos, he would not be liable for writing because he's not written God's entire name. Why does it make a difference? Because what God's name represents, it's one essence, one unity. God is not just, you can't divide God into parts. With someone's name, person's name, it has letters, you put all the letters together, or a picture, you have different parts of the picture, you put it all together, and it makes a picture. But by God, He's indivisible, it's one essence, it can't be divided up. So therefore, unless you write the whole name of God, it's not considered writing, because it can't be divided up. Okay, so now going back to the husband and wife. Since they have God's name in the names of Ish and Isha, they become one unit. They are one unit. They can't be divided up. So now when they bring this mincha offering, the wife brings the mincha, that we said the husband also has a part in it. Oh, but the husband's a Kohen, so it has to be all burnt. But the wife's not a Kohen, so it should really, the remaining part of the offering should be eaten by other priests. And we said, how is this allowed? How can 2 people bring 1 mincha? Only 1 person's allowed. Well, now we know, because we have God's name in Ish and Isha, that means they are like one unit. And therefore, when they bring the mincha, they're bringing it as one, not as 2 separate people, but as one. Again, this whole Gemara that we spoke about, Rabbi Akiva says you have God's name in the man and woman. Again, he sees a marriage as another example of not 2 individuals that come together, but rather one unit. So now we have a few different examples. We had the benching, the zimun, that we said, Rabbi Akiva says, each individual, once he hits a minyan, that's it, you become part of the unit. You had that angry man that didn't want to benefit from the town, and we said anyone that moves into that town, even after the person made that vow, becomes part of the town, it becomes part of the community, it becomes one part of that unit, I keep saying it. And again, a husband and wife, you have, since they have God's name in Ish and Isha, and we have this idea that God's name is one unit, it's indivisible. So that's why a husband and wife are allowed to bring a mincha together, even though by everyone else, only 1 person may bring it, because they become one unit. Right. Now let's have a quick look at Sphira. It talks about Sphira in this week's Parsha. Back to the source sheet. I know we've been skipping back and forth. Over here, this week's Parsha. And from the day on which you bring the sheaf of elevation offering, the Omer, the day after the Shabbos, you shall then count off 7 weeks. Sheva Shabbosos. We know the Omer is 49 days, that's 7 weeks. In the next verse, it also says 50 days. So we know we have to count the days as well. So you've got to count the weeks and the days. Okay, that was the last source for now. So stop the screen share. Now we can all do maths, hopefully. So for example, if we said today is the 14th day of the Omer, and we say Hayoim Arba Asa Yoim Shnei Shavuos Omer, we say today is 14 days, which is 2 weeks of the Omer, just for example. So we know if we say today is 14 days, we know 14 days is 2 weeks. Why do you have to say 14 days, which is 2 weeks? Why is it necessary? We get the point. We know how many days it is. There's this idea that it's important to have the individual days mentioned and the weeks. Although a week comprises all the days of the week, it comprises all the individual days, it's important also to say separately the amount of days as well as the weeks. What's this all hinting to? So in life, you sometimes have people that you love and people that you like. Sometimes you can love people and not like them, vice versa. Some people we don't love or like. But a family is a good example. Let's take father and a son relationship. Father loves his son. He might not always like him. He might be annoying, or he might never listen to what, he might be a bit wayward, whatever it is. But liking someone, or we're going to translate it better as kavod, respect. Respect is the idea that you let someone have their own space. We have to recognize that what one person has and that they're different to us, they have what we don't have, we have what they don't, and we complement each other. But often in their family environments, parents love their children so much that they want their children to be like them, and they project their goals and their views onto the children. So let's say the father's a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant, and he has this idea that his son also one day will be one of these professions. And then it turns out that the son ends up being, I don't know, an actor or a boxer or, I don't know, something completely what the father or the parents didn't have in mind. And there's almost like a disappointment there. Why aren't you following the steps that we suggested for you? Why aren't you doing what we want? And we love you so much, son or daughter. Why aren't you doing what we suggest for you? And this is the problem. There is definitely love, but there's a lack of respect there. There's a lack of space given to each individual to be who they want to be. Obviously, we're not talking about clear mistakes when things go wrong. Then parents need to get involved. So this happened also with the students of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva's students, they loved each other. They understood very well this idea of being part of the clan, part of the community, from Rabbi Akiva's teachings about once you're part of a minyan, every extra person becomes part of it. We don't change the formula of the zimun. When you're part of the city, even if you arrive after someone made a vow against that city, you become part of the city straight away, even if you haven't been living there 12 months. Or this idea of bringing this korban together. Normally a meal offering can only be offered by one person, but by a husband and wife, they become one unit. They understood you become part of the klal. Jewish people are one body, one soul, etc. What they didn't understand is that we are also individuals as well. You have to leave space for every person to express their opinion, to put tefillin on. There's millions of people putting tefillin on every day. But God wants every single person to put tefillin on because each person has their own intention, their own way of doing it. There's the idea of the 12 shvatim, the 12 tribes. Each tribe was slightly different. We discuss all the offerings they brought to the dedication of the temple, and it repeats again and again and again. Why is all the repetition necessary? Because everyone did it. They brought their own personality, their own selves to the mitzvah. Again, with Shabbos candles, you could say, why should I like Shabbos candles? Millions of Jewish women are lighting Shabbos candles, but God wants every individual to do it. Yes, we are part of the nation of Bnei Israel. We are all one family, one people, but there is, and it is so important that each person brings themselves to the table. And that's why with Sphira Sa'ima, you can't just count the weeks. You can't just say, yeah, we understand how many days make up a week. The week is the idea of the cloud. All the days are part of the week, we say, no, you have to also count the individual days. And Rabbi Akiva, you could say this was his mistake to say such a thing. It's not for me to say. But perhaps his students loved each other so much that when they were convinced they were right in a piece of learning or how to understand a certain interpretation of the law or how to live, they loved their fellow so much. Said, you must accept my opinion. You must see how I see it. I love you so much. Please just come onto my way of thinking. Just see it how I see it. And there was no room for debate. It was my way or the highway. And it came from a good place. But it seems over time it spiraled out of control, that it became in a way of arrogance and ego and dissent. And that's a problem. So in life, we have to understand, just as we all look differently, we all think differently, and we all have our own talents and attributes to bring to the Jewish people, and there is space for that and it's required. But at the same time, that should also fill back into this idea that we are one people and that we are on one mission together. But the best way of doing that is by each person bringing their own portion, their own talents to the bigger picture. Just to finish with the idea of, you have an orchestra, brought many times this idea. It's beautiful when you hear everyone playing together, but you only get that amazing sound of a symphony when each person he's on the violin, he's on the cello, he's on the trumpet, he's on the flute, whatever it is. Everyone is doing their own thing, but they're following the conductor, all under one God, one people. So again, to avoid this mistake of showing lack of respect for each other, we have to remember, yeah, we're one people, but we're also different. But as long as we're heading in the right direction, all on the same boat, the same team, that is the ultimate best way to do it. Thank you very much for joining, and Shabbat Shalom, and enjoy Lag BaOmer.